Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Perrine, and I'm the head of operations here at Encore.
And I'm Holly, and I'm our customer support specialist.
Joining us today to talk about all things finance is Encore's very own fractional Chief Financial Officer, Manisha. Hi, Manisha. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Hi, Pareen. Really nice to be here. Thank you.
So Manisha has been working with us at Encore and helping us again on all things finance for the past year. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself before we dive into this interview?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I'm Manisha. I'm a chartered accountant by training. So I qualified with KPMG, so one of the big four, and spent like 3 years in audit, a couple of years in consulting, and then I spent a couple of years at EE, the mobile phone company. And then about sort of 10, 11 years ago, I started working with startups and scale-ups, helping them to raise money to like make more sense of their finances. So I operated as a self-employed like consultant for a bit before I got a couple of permanent roles. And now I'm back like consulting for businesses like Encore. So yeah, that's a bit about me.
Let's dive right in. So obviously, because the topic of today's conversation is finance and managing finances and payments as a self-employed musician, but especially also as a woman in this industry, I guess we wanted to start with asking you a little bit about the gaps in earnings between men and women. So women across all industries tend to earn less than men. The music industry is unfortunately no exception there. And so it's quite a broad one, but do you have any advice, and what advice can you give to musicians and women in this industry who want to make sure that they are pricing their services correctly and who want to increase their chances at a successful negotiation with a client?
Cool. Well, yeah, thank you very much for inviting me on. It's really nice to be chatting about these things. So yeah, the question about, how can what advice can I give to musicians who want to make sure that they're pricing their services correctly? And as a woman who has been in a very male-dominated industry in finance for my entire career, it's very difficult to know what you're worth. So I think that, I've only managed, after like kind of 15, 20 years in my career to really know what I'm worth and what I can charge. And it's been a really difficult kind of journey to get there. But I think the first thing is try to figure out what you're worth, talk to other musicians in the market, make sure you're pricing accordingly, make sure that you understand like what your USP is. Like, are you always really punctual? Do you add that little bit of sparkle when you talk to your clients? Like, these things really matter when you're selling yourself and your services. So really don't underestimate how much people will pay for that. And I guess the second point is like more practical, which is just leaving some room to negotiate on price, because quite often we will go in with a price and say, okay, this is my limit, this is my absolute lowest price. The customer can either kind of like give or take it, whereas actually customers do like to feel like they're having a little bit of a bargain or a negotiation. So do set your price slightly higher so that you can have like a little bit of room to negotiate. And then my other top tip is just get a little kind of additional service that you can throw in if you're at the bottom of your pricing range already. So you sort of say, okay, I can't go down to that price, but what I can do is I can throw in an additional 15-minute set or a bespoke song or a bit of lighting. And that means that the customer really kind of thinks that they're getting like good value for money, and you're still taking home the same. So yeah, but it's a hard one. It is a really hard one.
And are there any ways that a musician can help decrease the risk of not getting paid by a client?
Yeah, again, it's a challenging one when you're kind of like, self-employed, that you're kind of doing everything, right? You're being your accountant, you're being your debt chaser and everything. So like using an intermediary like Encore like means that your payments are handled for you. That makes things a bit easier. If you do want to do it yourself, like you can be very upfront about your billing arrangements, because it's really common when you've got like services between people that people will ask for a deposit and then the remainder once the client is satisfied, because it just decreases the risk for both parties. Like as a musician, you're not going in there thinking, oh, am I going to get paid today? You're already secure that you've got a deposit. And the client also is like, oh, how is this musician going to perform? It's okay, I've still got a remainder to pay. So I think that's probably the easiest thing to do. Just start doing that straight away. But also making sure that you chase for payment. Like it might sound really simple, but sometimes people do forget to pay their bills. Maybe they've just gone honeymoon and kind of forgotten about the person that they're supposed to pay. And you know, actually just being a bit kind of like on the front foot about it. So sending a message a week before the payment is due and then following up like every day after the due date. I think that's probably the best thing to do. I think a lot of things can be solved by good communication between parties. So yeah, I would do that.
And like, what would you say would warrant taking legal action in pursuit of payments?
Yeah, like legal actions, you know, it's a hard one. So in my entire career, I've never come across a point at which an invoice hasn't been paid and it's gotten taken to court, or there's legal action being taken. And that's generally because legal action is incredibly costly and incredibly time consuming. So if you were going to take legal action, you know, you have to be prepared for those costs and that time to escalate. And you have to think, is this really what I want to be doing with my time? However, the threat of legal action can sometimes kick somebody into being paid. So like if you are sort of thinking, oh gosh, you know, this person hasn't paid, I feel like I've delivered my service really well, I don't understand what the issue is, then maybe you can threaten legal action. But I would say way before that, you need to really understand what's gone wrong. Like, why is the client not paying? Is it an innocuous reason, or is there something else underneath it? So it's a complicated one, and I would say, you know, don't take legal action lightly.
Yeah, so it sounds like you would always recommend some sort of, even if it's not official mediation, but talking and going in with the benefit of the doubt in most conversations and trying to work it out collaboratively.
What 100%, 100%, because generally people are, you know, wanting a service and I don't mind paying for the service as long as they know how much it is. And normally the kind of issues come as if the amount is different to what they were expecting to pay, or they haven't received the service that they wanted. And if you can get to the bottom of why a client isn't paying, then you can normally resolve it. It might be that, you know, your client has, you know, got into financial difficulties, but maybe you can talk to them about, hey, can you pay me 20 pounds now, 20 pounds next week, and it kind of goes from there. But I think it's just understanding why is the first step, and then you will normally be able to come to some sort of resolution just through being able to understand each other.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks, Manisha. So we've talked quite a bit about pricing your services, getting paid for your services, but I guess once you've gotten paid as a self-employed musicians, there's the whole question of doing your own accounting or outsourcing that and doing your taxes. And I guess there's a whole other host of questions that come with that. So if you don't mind, let's move on to the topic of taxes. With a few questions on that, which I'm sure will be really helpful for everyone.
Yeah, so what kind of top tips do you have in terms of tax returns for self-employed musicians?
Yeah, so I mean, it's not an easy area, I would say, to get on top of your taxes. It's not impossible to do yourself. If you're kind of feeling a little bit nervous, there are lots of like accounting firms and small accounting firms that will kind of do your taxes for you for a fee. I would say I'm biased because I am an accountant and I do my own taxes. But really the thing that you need to do, whether you're doing them yourself or you're outsourcing it, I would say do them early. So make sure that there are no surprises, that you're not caught by any penalties or late payment fees or anything. So get on top of it. You've got it's nearly a year. It's like 9 months to do your tax return from like the 6th of April all the way to the 31st of January. So do it early. It will save you quite a lot of stress, and also you'll remember what has happened in the past year more easily. The other top tip is keep all your detailed records. Like, it's boring, I know, but if you can do it regularly, do it every month, go through like all of your record keeping, like what costs have I got, which clients have paid me, what other outgoings do I have, and keep it all in one place. Like, I keep mine in a Google Drive, but there's also like lots of software out there. Like Xero is a really nice software package. It's about £40 a month, so it's not free, but it helps to keep on top of like lots of billing or lots of costs. But yeah, just keep your record somewhere safe. And then my third tip is just like make sure that you or your accountant is claiming for everything you can to reduce your tax bill. So there's lots of like little tricks that you can do, and things like, I cycle to my clients, and actually you don't charge your clients, but you can offset your profits with like 20p per mile of cycling that you've done, for example. And you can also allocate the use of your home. So if you've got like a studio, or you use part of your home as a studio, for example, you could potentially reclaim those costs from, like, you could deduct them from your tax returns. So ask your accountant if you're not sure, or do some quick Googling online. But yeah, there are lots of like little things that you can claim for that you might not be obvious at first sight.
Thanks, Manisha. All really, really helpful tips. And I guess in terms of not so much the tax return itself, because you've been very thorough on that, but I guess when it comes to tax planning, do you have any top tips there as well?
Yeah, I mean, don't forget, people have careers around tax planning, right? It's not a simple, straightforward thing, and there are lots of different solutions depending on your circumstances. So I would say, as a musician, I would say there's probably like two things to watch out for. The first is the 85k VAT registration threshold. So once you as a self-employed person, or your company, if you've got a limited company, once you've hit that £85,000 threshold, in any 12-month period, you have to inform HMRC that you've reached that threshold, and you will have to start charging your clients VAT on top of your services. And that's 20%, right? That's not an insignificant amount. And because if you're a musician, you're normally dealing with people through entertainment or through individuals, people can't often reclaim that VAT back. So it is kind of like effectively a 20% price hike. So just be very careful about when you reach that registration threshold. Do your planning, make sure that your prices, if can cope with it, that you're able to continue operating. So I think that one's the first one. The second top planning tip is, when you're running as a self-employed person, there are benefits to that, but there are also benefits to being a limited company where you can pay yourself salary and dividends, and it's going to depend on your individual circumstances. So I would definitely consult an accountant, but there might be ways of reducing your tax bill if you're self-employed by setting up a limited company. The benefits aren't as good as they used to be, because HMRC are kind of clamping down on the way that you pay taxes through a company. But it's definitely worth exploring, or at least having a conversation with your accountant to see whether there could be any tax savings there.
That's super helpful. And I think for musicians, the VAT threshold can sometimes feel like something that'll take a lot longer to get to. But for any musicians operating as part of a group or a collective, that can actually kind of sneak up on you. And it's really, really good to kind of have educated yourself on that before it does happen, and how to kind of make sure that you're still competitively priced without taking a loss on those bookings.
Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, definitely very valuable advice. Thank you. So I guess now onto the topic we've kind of started to touch on personal finance a little bit more, and the personal side of finance planning and taxes and all of that. And I guess that's something that's so intertwined with how we deal with our day-to-day work and our day-to-day tasks, not taxes. I have taxes on my brain now. So we thought we'd close out this interview with a few questions on the topic of personal finance.
So what kind of advice would you give to musicians, just in terms of like day-to-day personal financial planning, also kind of bearing in mind that a lot of working musicians are self-employed as well?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good question, and one I actually feel like should be taught at school. I feel like that financial planning is really important, whether you're an individual or a business, self-employed. Yeah, it is. I think it's a really important thing, and yeah, I would like to see more kind of formal education around this. But like my advice is like it's pretty much all the same, right? That the principles are the same. It's about understanding your finances before you make any decisions about your circumstances or your costs. So I mean, I quite like to have a plan for how much you need to earn each month to cover your costs, and then a little buffer. So I think about things on a monthly basis, and I know that if I want to, pay the mortgage and pay my gas bill, that I need to earn this. And then I work back, well, how can I earn this in any given month? And then what I would do is just monitor how you're doing against that really regularly. So that does require probably spending sort of like half an hour or an hour looking at your bank statement, understanding what's come in and what's gone out. And I use a Google spreadsheet for that. So like that's free to use. But again, you can use something like a bit of accounting software or something to help you. But it really comes down to just being able to like understand what's coming in, what's going out, how much do I need to have like of a buffer. And I think just understanding what you're spending your money on is really, really powerful, because sometimes I'm like, oh, it's only a £20 thing from Amazon. And at the end of the month, I'm like, how much have I spent on Amazon? It's like £400 worth of stuff that I don't really know what I've got for it. So I think just taking a little bit of time to review what's happened and then make a plan for your next month. Oh, and okay, I'm not going to spend £400 on Amazon. I'm going to take my credit card details off it, for example. That can really help just to manage your spend. But you get better at it the more you do it, and it just then becomes a really like easy habit to kind of get into, that you kind of know how much you're earning, you know what your costs are, you can spot on your bank statement whether there's like a weird thing that's kind of gone in and out, because you know your numbers. And so I would say, like, it sounds, maybe to some people it sounds boring, to me it sounds like fascinating. I love this stuff. But I would say that for day-to-day financial planning, the first thing you do is understand your numbers, and then the second thing you do is monitor them, and make it a habit.
That makes so much sense. I completely agree with you. Financial literacy is so empowering, and it's not taught anywhere near enough. And I would say, especially to women and girls, it's been a very sort of gate-kept area of life. It's great to see that there's more movement there and more conversations happening around financial literacy for women as well.
Yeah, no, because I think it can be very difficult, because in a lot of like setups, generally women aren't kind of like money generators. They are seen as like people who kind of keep the house running and take the kids to school. Well, that's also got quite a lot of value, right? But yeah, I think because women generally tend to be the ones that aren't earning as much, or maybe not earning, they don't have access to that bank account information. That means that they can kind of get on top of the finances. But I feel like it's a team effort. Like in our household, like we talk about money all the time. Like I talk about it to my kids. They're only 5 and 8, but they know what things are worth, so they can understand now, like, oh, that seems expensive, or that doesn't seem expensive. And I think it's talking about it really helps. So if you're kind of feeling like, you know, you're a woman and this, you know, I don't feel as financially literate as I could be, then the first step is to start talking about it. Just ask a couple of questions, you know, what's coming in, what's going out, can I see this, can I see that? And eventually it becomes just easy to have those conversations.
Yeah, that's really great advice. Also, money can be such a stressor, and it is for most people, but part of that is also compounded by the fact that it's such a solitary experience because it's not talked about as much. I love to talk about money. I
Me
think it's
too.
a healthy thing to do, but yeah, as you say, it's not really been the done thing traditionally. But yeah, I completely agree with you that there's only stuff to be gained by actually making it an open conversation and starting early as well, and making it something that's just part of life, because it is.
Mm.
I guess on this topic, you've already kind of touched on that, but unfortunately, the data nowadays still tells us that women tend to shoulder a lot of the responsibility of, you know, childcare and housework, and a lot of unpaid labor, and labor that's not necessarily, you know, very recognized as value adding, even though, as you said, it has so much value, and it contributes so much in so many different ways. But the result of that can mean that a lot of women find themselves quite financially vulnerable. And especially when, you know, they are in a career like, you know, as a self-employed musician, a career where there's not a lot of in the way of support for parents, parental leave, things like that aren't really things that they can rely on. So obviously this is a much, much larger conversation than just a kind of top tips type question. But do you have anything that you would like to share, any advice or thoughts on how, you know, women in music, and any women really, can build up more financial resilience, or how to kind of navigate those additional challenges?
Yeah. Yeah, it is really difficult. Like, I don't know if there's kind of one solution. And you know, I hear it, and there are many different flavors of the same issues going on. Like, even if you're kind of like not worried about money, then maybe you're worried about kind of time or your career. And if you're, you know, worried about, you know, how am I going to have time with my kids, it's kind of like the same sort of, how do we have it all? And you know, I've struggled with this. Like, I've got two small children and a career, and I'm fortunate enough that I've got a partner, a husband, who, like, you know, pulls quite a lot of weight. And I think being able to talk to him about how I've been feeling and about the struggles that I've had has been very helpful, because he's then been able to kind of like take off more of my off my plate. But I appreciate that some people don't have the support of a partner, or like maybe, you know, don't have more financial worries. And then I can only say, like, you know, I'm a big advocate of talking through things, and I think that there are lots of support networks, especially locally, where you can kind of meet up with people for a chat and a coffee, and you can start to broach some of these types of difficult situations, and quite often you uncover that people have been through similar things, and sometimes it's about just not feeling so alone in the stress of, you know, your day-to-day life. So I would say kind of, yeah, community support groups, that kind of thing could really help people. But yeah, and I think the other thing is making sure that you're kind of, you know, enough about what's going on financially, like in your own life, to be able to kind of like make the right decisions. But yeah, I think for women in music in particular, like maybe the thing you could do is, while you are earning, you know, you're making hay while the sun shines, right? Like, so when you can gig, that you're gigging, and when you know, you actually need to take a break, you've built up enough of a buffer to kind of take some time off and spend with your family or your children, or whatever it is. So yeah, I think there's, again, it's not I don't have any magic solutions. I think it's all about just finding your own way through talking, support, and through a little bit of kind of financial planning.
Thanks. Yeah, I really appreciate how open and honest you've been on this, especially on this topic, because it touches on so many very personal things. And as you say, I think if there were a magic solution, we probably would have heard of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it sounds like communication, finding ways to support yourself and find support networks to lean on, in addition to financial literacy and having that confidence that you know how to navigate your own finances is a good place to start.
I think so. Yeah.
But yeah, this is something that we could probably sit here and talk about all afternoon and longer than that probably. But yes, this has been super interesting and so valuable. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat to us. Holly, did you have any last questions or anything else you wanted to chat to Manisha about?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think money can sometimes be a bit of a like taboo subject for some people to speak about. And I think, as Perrine mentioned earlier, especially like finance is something that has kind of been gatekept, especially from women. So I think, yeah, just this conversation has just showed the importance of like that we do need to speak about these things. And yeah, just always ask questions especially if you're unsure about something. And yeah, whether that's discussing it with your colleagues, other self-employed musicians, or kind of reaching out to an accountant, a financial advisor, or as Manisha said, even just going on Google. I just think, yeah, it's so important and empowering as well to be financially literate, in our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, thank you very much, both of you, for bringing this topic up and for inviting me, because yeah, it's been really nice to be able to talk about it. Thank you.
Of course, thank you so much. And thanks everyone for watching us. Feel free to leave us comments or pop us an email as well if you have any questions or if there's anything else that you'd like to hear us talk about on the topic of finances, anything that you would find helpful, just let us know. And thanks again for watching.